In 1935, retired Major General Smedley Butler sufficiently showed, guys, that war is in fact a racket. What does that mean? War serves only one purpose, which is to generate, expand, and transfer the capital from one place to another, to generate it and collect it, right? To expand it. That's the main goal. And so wars are always this way. They're always a racket. They're always serve some kind of economic purpose and nothing else. Secondary to this is that they remove competition by obviously sending them off to war. What does that mean by sending the competition off to war? Well, they send off the middle class. They send off the lower classes there. And most importantly, they do send off Christians, because Christians are a competition to them as well. And sometimes they send off both, right? However, Major General Butler was not the only one to see this. He wasn't the first one. He wasn't the last one. And simply, he was just stating the fact from his experience. He recognized that through these wars, he saw a great deal of these financiers collect a lot of money and have a lot of different products that never made it to the battlefield. A lot of them locked up in warehouses in the back 40, right? And so they were dug out later. And so they just made off these contracts, made money. They transferred wealth, they generated, they expanded it, whatever you want to say. It's a story as old as time. And oddly enough, what we're talking about tonight has a lot to do with that. It has a lot to do with the generation of capital, the expansion of capital, and the transferring of capital, right? And because of where it centers, which is extremely important, is that it centers the war or the conflict that we look at right now with Iran. Centers around one of the most ancient trade routes in the world, an ancient trade route that has become a center point for global conjuncture, a center point for the hegemonic control of the West. And so anytime you see hegemonic control shift from one power to another, escalate from landed empire to sea people, understand that it has everything to do with this area of the world where the ancient trade routes are, right? The Strait of Hormuz, as an example. The Strait of Hormuz, it sits just south of where the Garden of Eden should be, where it's buried under thousands of years of silt. If you go just north of there, you'll find it. If you dig down, you will find where the Garden of Eden is supposed to be. And in between there, you'll find the house of Enlil, or the house of Yahweh, where they watched over the garden, where he managed to drug and seduce one of his sister's young ones into his lair, right? Does that sound familiar? It should, because it's happening still, right? The seduction of young ones by the elite, or the what they claim to be the new gods of Western civilization. Sounds familiar to me. So we can connect the dots. Obviously, they're Talmudic followers that follow the war god, and so we can go on with that one, but that's for a different time. Historically, however, wars have never held tangible value other than to generate, expand, and transfer, or steal capital. That's what they are. That's what they do. That is the only purpose of war. They have no other purpose. They hold zero philosophical, ideological, or social value, regardless of what social historians attempt to pass off as history. And when they do, it's always bunk. It's filled with illogical holes, and they exploit one or two primary documents while using their own think tanks to support it. They're essentially lying by manipulating the interpretation of primary documents, because for every two that they use, there's about 10 or 15 that prove them wrong, right? And so when it comes to the value other than economic value of these wars, understand that that is never how it works, right? The philosophical, ideological, and social value, well, let's be honest, it's made to fool the public. Oh, we got to fight terrorism. That's a lie, because we fund it, right? Oh, we got to keep them from having nukes. Well, that's a lie, because they never had nukes in the first place, nor desired to have nukes. In fact, when it comes to this war, well, let's be honest. They started out with no nukes, and now they're on their way to having nukes. Who did that? Us, trying to fight them from having, or trying to keep them from having nukes, right? And so when this is particularly true or especially true, it's at a point of global conjuncture where the two halves of the world come together and meet, where you have the Western and the Eastern half meet. And it's always, always, always in this specific area, which normally called the Indian Ocean trade, right? However, how history calls it, it's the East Indies and Asian trade, right? Where opium was one of the biggest commodities in the market that made this group, particularly this group that we're dealing with, rich, right? And so, like the war that we are currently witnessing and are a part of today, it is, as Charles Baer called it, an economic or commercial conflict, one that holds significant importance to what happens next, which is obviously a question that we've asked before on the show. In fact, 2 weeks ago, we said, what happens next? And then we kind of had the idea of what would happen, right? We understood that the outcome of what these peace talks were going to go with was going to happen, I should say. Sorry. The current war involving the Israeli East India Company, their American proxy state, or periphery, as we can now call it, and Iran, right? Peace was never an option. So when it comes to what happens next, peace wasn't an option. And so we need to understand that was going to be a lost cause, right? A true lost cause is that they were trying to get something out of this. And we knew that what happened next was the escalation, because this conflict potentially determines the shift of Western hegemony, right? It determines who controls it, which power, which will be, from the Western civilization, or sorry, the shift happens from Western civilization to the global leader sea people. This is the first time that we're watching the power move from landed empire to sea people, completely separated from that landed empire. Normally, they have some loyalty to them, right? Because they have had to please the state at some point to be in good favor, to find influence in the government, and instead now they are on their own. They're separate. They control everything, so they don't have to please anybody. Again, prior to the sea people, it's connection to entrepot, right? However, this shift nullifies borders. This shift nullifies empires that weren't theirs. This shift redefines sovereignty. It gets rid of the sovereignty of the landed empires. No longer can we hold this state-centered perspective of world systems analysis. We can't do it anymore. This is the installation process of what we call the New World Order. We've been saying it for years now, decades at this point, since the George Bush Sr., right? This is the installation of it. We have two parties at hand that are competing for control of Western hegemony, right? You have Donald Trump's Board of Peace, where he sits at the top. It's effectively his third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh term or whatever till he dies. And then on the other side, you have the global elite, who are definitely not as organized. They're not together, united in any way, except for a few commonalities that they have. But they do have more power, right? And so we're seeing, when it comes to peace, how this competition plays out. Now, at this point, we should probably say that this is something that neither red, blue, or libertarian could fix, especially when AIPAC is a primary funder of this project. And if you still believe that, you need to wake up. You're part of the Truman Show and you haven't realized it yet. Wake up from that. Understand that matrix you're living in isn't real. It is not red versus blue. It's not red versus blue versus libertarian. It's not red versus blue versus whatever the hell kind of color you want to label your party or animal you want to put on its logo, right? This is us versus them at this point. This is the replacement of America, the replacement of America as controllers of hegemony is not a good thing. I know I've seen some comments on here. It's not. It is a world that will not be encompassed by truth and justice because they've never known it. When they control it, that won't be a thing. And the ruling class knows nothing yet. So to be clear, peace was never an option when it came to this war. It's never an option. It wasn't an option for Donald. It wasn't an option for Israel. And it was a secondary option for Iran, but they understood, because they're a lot smarter than us, that probably wasn't going to be a route that they wanted to take. Israel, again, never had it on the table. Iran, significantly smarter. So, which is why 2 weeks ago we asked the question, what happens next? Even Iran said, we want to know the answer to that. So they changed their entire war strategy to deal with two belligerents of war that were essentially stringing them along and making them look somewhat like fools. Now, Iran, again, they're smarter, but in this case, the fact that they're even kind of accepting that a talk is possible is a problem that they need to understand. They need to figure out how to fix that and just stay away from it, right? 2 weeks ago, we knew this to be the case. We predicted that Israel would do exactly as it did. Um, most happen, and those showed much to learn about the intersection. This point showed much to learn about the, I guess, intersocietal interconnectedness of the world, how international politics work, which prior to this point wasn't as obvious and wasn't as clear. So it was a lot of theoretical assumptions to be made or theories to be tried out and see what happens next. So that question as to what happens next will be understood here. We will answer it or try our best to answer it or show how much or how close we can get to answering that question, right? And here in the studio to help me understand what happened since we last talked about this topic, which honestly, when we talked about it, the next day things lit up and kind of some answers started to appear. But to help us out understand this, we again have in the studio James the Elder, the Dissenting Goyim Media Group's in-house historian and political analyst, and he knows a lot about how this post world has started to work and come together, and the groups that have done it. Because if we look at the actors of interstate politics or transglobal or international politics, however you want to label it, is that it's not the state playing the game. The state is out of the game. It's the elite, the merchant groups, the people that hold the power and the money. I'm gonna go past this. So, welcome to the Dissenting Goyim Show, episode 17, brought to you by the Dissenting Goyim Media Group. And first and foremost, we are thrilled for the support that we got, especially here on YouTube and other sites that we posted, but particularly YouTube. We saw a great deal of support, especially after we skipped a week. So that's awesome. So, Jim, when we ended our show 2 weeks ago, episode 15, for those who missed it, there was a lot of unknowns when it came to the progression of war, right? Trump had entered peace talks with Iran that resulted with a memoranda of some understanding. However, the primary issue with that memoranda was that each party involved had a different interpretation of various points, right? Israel then got butthurt that Trump felt like he got the upper hand on them. It kind of showed that the Warhawks weren't as influential as they thought. It showed that AIPAC didn't really have good enough backing, I should say. It's the question then at that point was Israel moving forward prior to the peace talks had ended. Israel was probably going to screw that up by nullifying the ceasefire. Iran had shifted their strategy, their war strategy. And so it led to somewhat of interstate their trans global political debacle. So first and foremost, let's talk about the Trump peace talks, right? When it came to Trump peace talks, what was he trying to get at here at this last talk?
Well, he's facing a situation where the oil reserves are just about gone. They're so low the tanks have create a structural issue for the tanks, and it's not just oil as in gasoline. What's really in shorter supply is the type of oil used to make diesel fuel. He needed an off ramp. The MOU gave him a bit of an off ramp, but you could see all along that he was presenting it in way to say something other than what it said. Whether he believed that or he was just trying to get U.S. media and others, some of his neoconservative critics and advisors to believe it or not is open for debate. So as you said, Israel went about screwing it up right away, and they pretty much made clear they're not going to be reined in, and they're not going to leave southern Lebanon specifically. And they've been back doing stuff in Gaza, killing more people. Um, that's never really stopped. It's just kind of lost focus. There have been um, a brewing conflict between Saudi Arabia and uh, Yemen, but that's not quite as big a deal as it some people might have seen it as being. So, what has happened since then? It's become clear that the U.S. bases, most of them, were damaged beyond being rebuilt, and we're not going to be asked to rebuild them. The whole Middle East is realigning. Saudi Arabia is extremely unhappy with the United States, and also with getting an awareness that the U.S. does not have the military power or capability that it either once had or thought it had. So you see realignments going on. Saudi Arabia growing closer to Pakistan. Um, so what's happened over the last 2 or 3 days? Oh, well, one other thing I'll mention, the Ayatollah's grieving period or funeral, whatever they call it in Islam, starts, I believe, today. So it's unlikely you're going to have a lot of activity over the next 2 or 3 days unless the U.S. initiates it. I think it maybe as long as a week. So what happened a couple of days ago? The British, who are always there to cause problems, which isn't a hit on all British people by any means. They're kind of like us. They're ruled over by a incompetent, self-centered, delusional elite that essentially control everything and are going to do what they want to do regardless. But anyway, the British encouraged one or more ships uh, to try to exit the Strait of Hormuz uh, outside of Iranian control. And let's be clear, the memorandum of understanding said very clearly that Iran controls the strait. It's presented differently in the media, U.S. media and Western media, but that's what it said, and that's the only condition they would have agreed to it. They fire a drone. U.S. fires back. I think a couple more ships try to follow this route close to the Omani side, and they get hit. And then there are a couple of symbolic uh, back and forth attacks. Then Trump stopped. So that's where we stand today. Will we go the route of a full-on escalation? Boy, we're really playing with fire at this point economically. There are going to be problems that are not seen yet that will ripple through the economies of the world for the next several months. They could get a whole lot worse. But the other side of it is, though, the Zionist power structure, money, influencers, they have a great deal of power, and you don't, by the way. Uh, and
Yeah. So let's
they really have nothing to lose. They're in the Greater Israel Project. This is the high water mark. If they let this go the way it looks like it's going, they don't get
speaking
it
of
back.
which, real quick, let's talk about the Greater Israel Project real quick. Um, RFK had an interview, um, and on this interview with Fox, obviously we know where this one's going. On this interview, RFK boiled down the idea that the whole myth of the genocide that Israel is committing and Lebanon and Gaza, right, the Palestinians there. He claimed that it was just a concoction of a bunch of communists infiltrating the parties here. What do you think about that?
He said that. That's kind of surprising and disappointing.
Yeah.
It's a very clear genocide. There have been uh, at least 100,000 people killed in Gaza. It could very well be more than that. Those are named, identified. Probably at least 80% of the non-combatants, vast majority women and children. And then the poverty and disease and destruction is caused. And we've all watched that. Now, what can you say to justify that? You can do like the Israelis do in their cabinet debates a lot of the time, that the people they're killing are subhuman. They're unredeemable goyim, and they need to take the land. And basically the same thing is going on in Lebanon. And in Lebanon, there are a significant number of Christian people that are on the receiving end of this. Anybody that can't see it at this point just doesn't want to see it.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing. I have a lot of Christians that argue that point. They're like, well, they're killing, terrorists and people who want to become terrorists. And meanwhile, never want to look at the fact that they're really killing Christians over there. And they're doing a good job at it. And so it's and the odd, the odd thing about that is when Christians talk about that, you want to sit there and ask them, did you miss what Christ was talking about? Right? Are we picking and choosing here, or are you going to finally admit that you followed the Talmud and not Christ?
Yeah, right. Yeah, the Christians here were taught, and this is all post World War II, and the guy that really did it largely was Olson, who was the head of the Evangelical Free Church, who has since turned away from these teachings. But he taught very specifically that Judaism and Christianity were the same thing, except for a minor theological point about who Jesus was. And people have believed that. They've been fed it.
They've ran with it. They've not just believed it. They've ran with it. That's been their whole point.
They ran with it.
Yeah.
And September, a really important pivotal point here is September 11th, because there was a period of time there where, say, Israel's support had pop-ups, points where it increased due to media in the 50s, and then the 6-Day War and the perceptions of the Yom Kippur War. But you get through the 90s, and there was no Russia/Gog to invade God's chosen people anymore. Iran became a little bit more prominent. It could be linked to some biblical history there, but there was no motivation drawing people to Zionism, and dispensationalism was dying an academic death theologically.
So
we had September 11th. What really happened there?
Was that now September 11th, right? Was that then you go back to say if Zionism and this kind of the support for God's chosen people and so on and so forth, was lost up until that point, and then you look at the data surrounding that, right? You look at the fact that, and I'm sorry, this is a conspiracy theory here, but you look at the fact that Mossad followed, the quote unquote hijackers around for what, years, 1-2 years.
Yeah.
And then you see the fuselage of a blown up plane tap the edge of the Pentagon, right where I believe critical files were, right? And then you have that mysterious building that just caught on fire, which was Building 7. And so you look at that, right? You see the death of an ideological belief system, not biblical, not religious, but ideological, that's turned into their religion, die out, and see a lack of support for it. And then it's like they needed to mainstream it, because once you had September 11th, then it was like, boom, right? And like this, everything just kind of came unglued, unwound, and you see the Zionist Council and the Israel lobby just become unreasonable at that point, right? So it's. Do you think that if we look at that from that point, that September 11th was an inside job between this group, right? Had to have been.
Yeah, I'm not going to put a specific theory out, but I am going to say that there are a great many things that cannot be explained. And there are also people that definitely did have foreknowledge, which is shown by financial market movements and other things. We don't know what happened there exactly. There's some technical questions and analysis that can be shed some light on it, but I tell you who benefited from it was Israel and the Zionist project. And you had the dancing Israelis, the Mossad agents, who knew it was going to happen. They were filming it. They were posing as
it seems
house painters.
It seems odd, right? Too, is that as you look at that, and all of a sudden, this is classic East India Company, right? It's classic. They need a military to kind of solidify their empire, right? And so you have that, and all of a sudden we were all over the Middle East, full throttle, right? It was like never before seen. You had the incidents with Bill Clinton and so on before that, but here is at the point where it's like they went for it all out, right? Israel said, we need a military. We'll create a problem that'll get a military here. We'll have more budget, right? And it's like that. It's clear that this, we look at what happened there, leading up to it, what happened, and then the aftermath, which is coming to a standstill here with Iran, is that it is that we have to be able to acknowledge that it was planned to solidify, I guess, an East India Company as a power worthy to control hegemony. Would you say that?
I would say I think that I can't prove that. There needs to be a lot more work done on that, but everything kind of points that way. It's an extraordinarily suspicious event, and it changed everything. You had people that the next weeks after that, they're off in church. They're ready for another crusade. And regardless of what we say about Islam, I don't have great thoughts about Islam, but I also don't hold it as being any worse than Judaism.
Right, as far as what they believe.
As far as what they believe about Jesus is actually a lot better. But that was a game changer. It was a if it wasn't a conspiracy, it was a gift that came along just at the right point in time. But again, I don't believe in coincidence.
Yeah, that's the idea, that the theory of randomness and coincidences are real things, right?
Yeah,
especially when it comes to interstate politics, or what we could call the great game, right? Is that coincidences and randomness doesn't work. It's a theory that can't be explained and shouldn't be credible, at least. Now, okay, so that being said, right, let's go with the military. I guess their ability to be as powerful as they thought they were, right? It's not what they thought. Okay, because they believed, right, as you said, they believed that they were a lot stronger, that they could take on anything, or as everyone says, the greatest military in the entire world, right? And so we have, when it came to these peace talks, and these peace talks, Trump went in with 4 major talking points, right? He had a lengthy suspension on uranium enrichment. Iran's current stockpile of enriched uranium should be diluted or downblended. Iran dismantles its nuclear sites, which is ironic because apparently Trump did that in October 7th. Yeah,
it was blown up, so there's nothing to dismantle, right?
Yeah, so why was that on the chopping block anyway? And then that Iran agrees to snap inspections. Okay. Then on the other hand of it, right, the memorandum was based on Iran's 14-point plan. But so first and foremost, right, before we get to Iran's 14-point plan, America is coming from the lesser position. They are not the dominant power in this war. And you could argue that they never were, right? And so with our military strength as bad as it is, and that's for a whole series of bad choices, leading all the way up to the changing of base names, which shows exactly where their priorities were. Did Trump really think that, those 4 talking points were going to be something that were even acknowledged by Iran?
No, of course, no, absolutely not. The point is whether they're acknowledged by people by public opinion in the United States. Iran basically that the memorandum of understanding was a surrender document for the United States and Israel based on what their initial objectives were. There's some fundamental things that have changed here regarding war as well. Drones are cheap and easy to make in large quantities. Um, and some of them that are uh, Hezbollah is using, those are fiber control. You can't even jam them. So it's kind of like the great equalizer. What Colonel Colt said, what God didn't make all men equal. Colonel Colt did. Well, the same thing's kind of true with drones.
Yeah.
Iran's very good at producing them, designing them, and then missiles. They're not that expensive to make. They're less expensive than what you use to try to shoot them down with. And the higher end
Unless you're,
missiles, the hypersonic.
Raytheon.
What's
Yeah,
that?
unless you're Raytheon.
Oh yeah, right. I'm taking money away from people, right?
Yeah, then Raytheon's going to charge the most amount of money for a product that sucks.
Yeah, they'll charge.
Yeah, and you're right. You're right with the drones, right? Did you see the last plane that was the F? I forgot what it was. Anyway, besides the point is that plane went down, and the pilot was saying that the drone was like a jellyfish.
Yeah, there's been some commentary on what that actually was. It was a swarm, probably.
Yeah, but it's just interesting. It's like America's using these, average drones, and Iran's figured out like a jellyfish, like alien type stuff. To quote the pilot there. Okay, so if we look at that, right, it's obviously America was in the lesser position. America, had 4 points. Obviously, one of the 4 points was something we destroyed on October 7th. So the conversation on it seems to be futile in itself. But hey, this just showed that they lied. And then how you have Iran's 14-point plan, right? Is that their first point was permanent and immediate cessation of all wars, or of war on all fronts, especially Lebanon. Right, the U.S.'s commitment to non-interference in Iran's internal affairs and respect for its sovereignty because of the obviously failed revolution that they tried. Lifting of the U.S. naval blockade within 30 days. Withdrawal of U.S. forces from around Iran. Reopening the Strait of Hormuz within 30 days with Iranian arrangements. Suspension of U.S. sanctions on Iranian oil. U.S. and allies to draw up reconstruction plans for Iran worth $300 billion. 60 days of negotiations to reach a final agreement based on nuclear issues and the complete lifting of sanctions, reiterating Iran's commitment not to produce nuclear weapons. During the negotiations, the U.S. will not increase its forces in the region or impose new sanctions. They release instantly $24 billion in blocked Iranian funds, establishing a monitor mechanism to implement the agreement. Final agreement to be approved by UN Security Council resolutions. The final negotiations will not begin before the release of half of those frozen funds, the suspension of oil sanctions, and the lifting of the naval blockade. Discussion about Iran's missile program and support for the resistance group have been definitively removed from the agenda. Now, right off the bat, 2 things we can say with this memorandum, right? We can say that it was essentially a pay to play, right? Is that if you want us to come to the table now, you got to pay for it, right? This is not only, and it's a surrender document. So that's the other point. So not only did America surrender, America had to surrender and pay to enter into these
damages,
talks.
Yeah.
Right. Now, the question is, though, when it comes to these talks, is like, at what point did Trump go, all right, we'll pay and play this game and hope that nothing happens? Or did he assume as he entered these conversations that Jared Kushner was trying to get another deal and that Israel was going to mess it up?
I think he had to assume that Israel was going to mess it up. And I'll say something about the Iranians on that. You talked about the Baird hypothesis, which is all wars are economic wars. And in the Western context, they are. But this is a case where the Iranians took a a high ground position that said, you will stop committing genocide in Gaza and southern Lebanon, or we're going to keep right on going. We're not done with you as long as you keep doing this. We ain't done with you. And
Right. And
that's not an economic position. That's a philosophical position.
well, I would argue with that actually. I would argue that that position was from the economic standpoint because the strait is a big deal when it comes to trade routes of the Indian Ocean, right? That carries right up into the Persian Gulf and so on. Um but well, I guess you could say it's philosophical, but again, it's to keep that trade moving, to keep sanctions off of their oil and their products. Um so I don't know, I'd argue that some parts of it were economic.
Oh, some parts of it were,
Yeah.
but there are some parts that I think aren't, which is what I was referring to. And
Yeah, and I think that you make a point there, right? So I'll concede a little bit on that. Is that you make a good point? Is that it is somewhat ideological because when it comes to their shift in strategy, it's the first time that we've seen even Iran, I guess, kind of say, we're not gonna wait for threats to emerge, and it's to preserve our position here in this region, which is a dominant position at this point,
yeah,
because they've proved that they are a dominant position, and it's enough to get even Israel to recognize that, right? As that they'll take initiative. Any expansion of this war is essentially going to be met with a reaction or response, and that extends all the way out to the West Bank with Lebanon and Gaza. I think I'm right on that. If I'm not, I regionally I'm maybe off. But it's like it's the first time where they said if you essentially continue on with these over there away from us, but where we do fund a little bit, not a lot, right? Obviously, I think Larry Johnson said what 5%.
yeah.
Um, but it's the first time where they did that, and that is a little a little bit ideological in nature. Is that hey, this is we control the power here.
The
But with that being said, though, that dynamic shift, right, is that what does that do for the developing of this war, right? What does that do as far as from a historical standpoint, kind of combined with that is what does that do as far as them controlling this war? Is this the first time that America's ever been into a war where somebody else has controlled that's not essentially Western powers?
Yeah, absolutely, it is. Vietnam didn't have a great deal of control, but this is a whole different. This is a whole different level. You could say that was a stalemate. It certainly did. It went a long way to destroying the fabric of America, and also didn't accomplish any political objectives. But this is a flat out defeat, and it's a pretty obvious one, where when you have Trump and Hague Smith still trying to tell everybody, oh, we sang more boats. It's not a football game. It's it's a strategic event, and the U.S. lost, strategic economic event, and the U.S. lost in every way that it could lose. And if it keeps going back, it's still going to get just going to be more of the same. Iran has learned from everything that's happened to them. They've been aided by Russia and China. And by the way, why is Ukraine still able to fight Russia? Because the Americans and the British are providing them Starlink and satellite intelligence. So uh, he used the same logic for both sides in terms of assessing any morality of it. I'd say, and we're doing the same thing. Only we haven't done it very well because the side we're supporting there has. Again, regardless of propaganda, has been decisively defeated, and it's just going to get worse and more obvious. Uh, so there you have it. We're not getting any stronger. We have nothing left to pull, and that brings an interesting question up for the U.S. and for Europe and NATO, which uh, Europeans really don't have the same interest we do. They need to wake up to that. But how far will they go? You have
How
these
far will
teams
they?
that are faced with losing hegemony, losing control of their own political systems. Exactly how far will they go?
Well, I think though, okay, so the hegemony question is important, and I think a lot of people don't really get it. History, we don't, historically, we don't talk about it. We don't talk about how all these conflicts, especially the bigger ones, like again, I talk about the American Revolution, the war between the states. For America, that was a loss of hegemony. There was a gain and a loss, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
But I think it's an important question to ask because if you look at the ideas, is that they're like us, they're not just losing hegemony, they're control of it in a multipolar world. It's being removed to the point that it won't return, and I think that a lot of people don't get is that
It will not return,
it,
and
it won't return. The clock is turned to midnight, and we can't keep playing this game because once it leaves, and if this works out the way the Western elite wanted it, then it's not coming back. It's old governments are dying. The landed empires are gone forever, unless you have a global scale, real organic revolution. Which again, revolutions like that never happen. And so yeah, it's an important question, right? Do they need to wake up, especially the Goyim here? Is that we're the hated people, and so to lose what we've built and no, not on the backs of other people, which is stupid, right? Um,
we
it's like to
originally
lose.
built a civilization. However, in the last 80 years, we've increasingly lived off the back of everyone else through a financial system.
Yeah, then that's true, and that's exactly true. Uh, yeah, like I say, it's important, but so I think that we're at an interesting point because if we look at one of the disagreements on the memoranda of understanding, which is all but nullified at this point, is that, and I think this is why it Israel took it, the reaction or created the reaction that they did, is because to put this in front of the UN Security Board is an interesting point because what they're doing is they're saying not only you are surrendering, not only are you paying us to surrender, we're going to make sure that Russia and China have more of a say in this game than you do. So you are surrendering also to them in this aspect, right? And so I think that's important when it
Yeah.
comes to hegemony, is that for Iran to say that, it's like that's like America, you're dead, you're gone,
Well,
you don't
yeah,
control anything. But most importantly, it's like Israel, you are no longer the dominant company here.
well,
You don't have it.
part of a reaction to this, if you looked at the Ukrainian war, while this has been going on recently, there's been a real dial up of an attempt to make it look like Ukraine is going to beat Russia or can stand up to Russia. The Europeans have done that, and they have a lot of press outlets here. So it's that too is a losing cause. So it's kind of a redirect. Don't look over there, look over here. We're doing good. No, we're not really doing good. We're committing terrorist acts with some long range missiles, but uh, Russia, though, is starting to sense that the 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 West is and will remain their existential enemy. So you start hearing some planning, theorizing of some important commentators that Russia needs to be prepared to extend the war into Europe. And maybe they do because they don't think the Europeans, at least the European elite that hold power, are going to stop. The U.S. is less invested in that and more invested in Israel, but it's still
I think
linked
I think
together.
that's dumb in itself because they all kind of, well, not sending stuff over there, but as far as like and the point is that it all converges at that one point,
Yeah,
right? The convergence of these conflicts, Ukraine and Iran, is that it converges in Israel, right?
yeah.
And so it's like America to look so short-sightedly at this um is just a bad decision, but not the fact that I'm not
Oh, Well, that was going pretty good. What do you want me to do? I think it's we get better all the time, and the interaction was good too. What happened? Well, I figured it. Okay, well, Chelsea or Bubby's got to be one of the two. Oh, it is okay. Actually, yeah, it still is recording. Yeah, so it's catching. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to exit.
Podcast just abruptly. Hey, everybody! As you know, the podcast just abruptly shut off. We had some internet problems that had to do with trying to figure out how to get the kind of the our World Cup working on our TV, and it's just the way it works out. However, I just want to explain a little bit. As we were, cut off there, we were talking about how that kind of you had these two polarities of the world matching up each other, right? So you have Russia and China and Iran, which is why Iran put the memoranda in the hands of the UN Security Court because they wanted to make sure that not only was America surrendering, that not only was Iran the better power in this instance, not only was Israel a losing venture to invest in, but they wanted that, and Donald Trump had to pay to enter into that conversation. They wanted to make sure that we recognize that there is powers that can compete or that are now better than, say, the Israel-America lobby or relationship or whatever, the periphery and the core area. But so America has done the unprecedented thing, which is try to compete with a solidified power. So you have the China and the Russia and Iran kind of coming together in one relationship, not necessarily as one unit, but enough to recognize that on that part of the world, you do need some kind of relationship politically with the other powers, because there is some kind of commonality in those aspects, right? But in America, you have the National Defense Authorization Act, which is being debated very heavily, very rigorously right now. And so to combat the super pact, I should say, on the other side of the world, the eastern half of the world, which is what we're dealing with, that just beat us in a war. You have this kind of solidification between Israel and America, and you have Israel having more power and more say in the American military, right? You also have more budget for defense for Israel going in there. And so you kind of see that the way America's combating this, even though they're fairly short-sighted and what's going to happen, they should recognize, even the war hawks, that this isn't going to work out the way they think it is. You have this permanent tie now. So not only if the West does win, which they won't, you have the movement of hegemony to a level that won't ever be returned to landed empires. But now you have a military that is arguably, better than everybody else's, but not the best. But now you have it at the disposal of an East India Company, the Israeli East India Company. So that's creating this sea person's empire that is, where the final frontier of civilization is going to be. You're going to have this probably full frontal attack here with the Israeli East India Company versus the Eastern Super PAC, which is again Russia, China, and Iran. And it's all going to happen right there in that part of the world, right where the East and West converge. So that's kind of what we were getting at. We'll come back to this next week, and we apologize that we did have a technical difficulty and again technology, which is unfortunate, but sometimes it happens. And so we wanted to kind of show that things do happen, but we can wrap up the podcast now. Right, is that thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you. If there's more to say, please say it in the comments. I appreciate the feedback I've gotten already. It's been great. So you will find us on Rumble, you'll find us on YouTube, you'll find us on Substack, you'll find us on X. And we're working on a few other sites from there, but we appreciate your support. We see that the Dissenting Goyim Show is something of is collected a following, and I love that. I love that because that means we can have honest conversations and get to a point where we can say that this is truth. So, thank you. I appreciate you guys. Until next week. Goodbye.